Revenge with Karen.
You know the sound of $1 billion holding its breath. It's a low, electric hum, like a hive of cyborg bees stuck in a refrigerator. That's the sound of my life. I'm standing in aisle 4 of the main server hall, listening to the relentless drone of the cooling fans fighting a Texas thunderstorm that's trying to tear the corrugated metal roof off this glorified warehouse. Outside, sky is turning that bruised purple color that means a tornado is thinking about touching down just to ruin my Tuesday. Inside, it's 68 degrees and smells like ozone, floor wax, and the ghost in the parking lot 10 minutes ago. My name is Linda. I'm 45. I have a lower back that clicks like a Geiger counter when it rains. And for the last 15 years, I've been the only reason half this county doesn't go dark. Officially, my title is Operations Manager. Unofficially, I'm the janitor of the internet, the nun of the network, the woman who crawls into the belly of the beast when the diesel generators start coughing up black smoke at 3 a.m. I'm not sitting here typing this out because I want a pity party. I'm typing this because sometimes you have to burn the village to save the forget the village. I just burned it. I watched the flames with a cold cup of gas station coffee in my hand. But before I tell you how I dismantled a dynasty with nothing but a ballpoint pen and a stack of federal compliance forms, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It helps the algorithm find the other tired souls out there who are one bad boss away from snapping. And trust me, we need the numbers. Done. Good. Let's get back to the grime. This place, let's call it Lone Star Data, wasn't always the backbone of the local economy. 15 years ago, it was a concrete box filled with rat droppings and outdated servers that looked like they belonged in a Soviet submarine. That was before the big blackout. You remember the one? The grid collapsed like a majestic soufflé of incompetence. People were melting in their living rooms. The hospitals were running on fumes. I was just a junior tech then, working for Harold. Harold. Let's talk about Harold. Imagine a man whose entire personality is Golf Pro shop discount rack. He's the owner. He signed the checks, usually late. When the blackout hit, Harold was in Cancun. I was here. I spent 3 days sleeping on a camping cot next to the backup generators, manually feeding them diesel with a funnel and a prayer. Rewired the transfer switches with a flashlight in my mouth, while the temperature in the server room climbed to levels that usually cook brisket. I saved the contracts. I saved the data. When the lights came back on, the county realized that while everything else failed, this ugly concrete box stayed online. That's when the contracts started rolling in. The regional hospital network, they store their patient records here. The 911 dispatch backup system, that's on rack 12. The refinery down the road that processes enough volatile chemicals to turn this town into a crater. Their safety monitoring systems run through my fiber optics. I built this. Not with money, Harold provided the capital barely, but with sweat, anxiety, and missed birthdays. I know every cable in the subfloor. I know which cooling unit rattles in B-Wing, Unit 4, bearing is shot, needs grease every second Tuesday. I know the names of the security guards' kids. I'm not just an employee, I'm the load-bearing wall. So, standing there this morning, listening to the thunder rattle the blast doors, I felt a strange kind of peace. It was the calm of competence. I checked the humidity sensors, steady at 45%. I checked the generator fuel levels, topped off. I was the captain of a ship that never moved but traveled the world at the speed of light, walked past the main compliance wall near the entrance. It's a boring stretch of drywall, covered in framed documents that nobody reads. State operating licenses, federal safety certifications, insurance liability waivers. It's the kind of paperwork that makes your eyes glaze over faster than a Krispy Kreme. But if you looked closely, and nobody ever did, especially not Harold, you'd see one name typed over and over again in the responsible operator field. Linda Miller, license #TX49201OP. That's me. In the eyes of the state of Texas, the Department of Homeland Security, Critical Infrastructure Division, and the insurance underwriters, I am this building. Harold owns the bricks and the land. I own the reliability. If this place catches fire, the fire marshal doesn't call Harold, he calls me. If the 911 system goes down and someone dies because an ambulance didn't show up, the subpoena comes to my house. I stared at my name on the wall, framed in cheap plastic. It felt heavy today. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the fact that Harold had called a mysterious all-hands meeting for 10 o'clock a.m. He usually only shows up when he wants to show off his new truck or complain about the cost of electricity, as if I can negotiate with physics. "Hey, Becky," a voice called out. It was Mike, one of my lead techs. Good kid. Tattoos up to his neck, looks like he plays bass in a prison metal band, but he can splice fiber optic cable faster than a spider spins a web. "The boss man is here, and he brought the prince." My stomach dropped. The prince was our nickname for Brian, Harold's son. Brian had been away at university for 6 years, earning a 4-year business degree. Assumed he was majoring in beer pong and failing intro to reality. Last time I saw him, he was 19, drunk, and trying to mine Bitcoin on a laptop he plugged into a critical medical server. I had to physically unplug him before he violated HIPAA laws and crashed the ER database. "Is he wearing a suit?" I asked Mike, taking a sip of my coffee. It was cold. It tasted like battery acid and regret. "Worse," Mike grimaced. "He's wearing a vest, fleece vest, and loafers with no socks." I sighed, the sound escaping me like air from a punctured tire. Patagonia vest or generic corporate giveaways? Patagonia. Branding visible from space. "God help us," I muttered. I walked toward the conference room, my steel-toed boots clacking against the raised floor tiles. The server lights blinked their rhythmic green pulses in the dark, a digital heartbeat I'd kept alive for a decade and a half. I patted the side of server rack as I passed, a habit, like scratching a dog behind the ears. "Good girl, keep running." I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I'd walked that aisle as the person in charge. The storm outside was nothing compared to the Category 5 stupidity that was waiting for me behind the glass walls of the conference room. I adjusted my tool belt. Yes, I wear it to meetings. It intimidates the sales guys, and pushed the door open. Harold was sitting at the head of the table, looking like a tomato that was about to burst. He was grinning, that wide, fleshy grin he uses when he thinks he's about to bestow a great gift upon the peasants. And next to him sat Brian. Brian looked like he had been generated by an AI prompted with arrogant tech bro who listens to motivational podcasts. He was scrolling on his phone, not even looking up as the staff filed in. Smelled like expensive cologne and unearned confidence. "Becky, come in, come in," Harold boomed, waving a hand that sported a gold pinky ring. "Grab a seat. We've got big news, huge news for the family." I sat down, crossing my arms over my chest. The air conditioning in the conference room was always too cold, a sterile chill that seeped into your bones. I looked around the table. Mike was there, looking nervous. Sarah from billing was chewing her cuticle. Atmosphere was tense, vibrating with the unspoken knowledge that wealthy people only gather the workers for 2 reasons: to fire them or to tell them to work harder for the same money. So Harold started, leaning back and lacing his fingers over his stomach. "As you all know, this place is my baby, but babies grow up, and so do sons." He clapped a hand on Brian's shoulder. Brian flinched slightly, then flashed a blindingly white smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Brian here has finally finished his MBA," Harold announced, beaming. "Top of his class at Well, he finished, and he's ready to take the reins. He's got fresh ideas, modern ideas. He's going to take Lone Star Data into the future." I felt a prickle of irritation on the back of my neck. The future? I was currently keeping the present from melting down. "What kind of future?" I asked, my voice flat. Brian finally looked at me. His eyes were empty, like windows in a house nobody lives in. "Optimization, Linda," he said. He said my name like it was a brand of generic detergent. "Synergy, cloud-native pivoting. We're sitting on a gold mine of legacy infrastructure that needs to be disrupted." Disrupted. The favorite word of people who have never had to fix anything in their lives. "We host the County 911 system, Brian," I said, keeping my temper on a leash. "We don't disrupt. We sustain. Are the boring concrete foundation that keeps the house from falling down." Brian chuckled, a dry, condescending sound. "That's the old way of thinking. That's utility thinking. We need platform thinking." Harold jumped in, sensing the friction. Now, Brian has a vision, and to help him execute that vision, we're making some structural changes." He looked at me. The grin faltered for a microsecond, then returned, plastered on with sweat and illusion. "Becky, been a rock, a total rock. But Brian is going to take over as Director of Operations, effective immediately." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the servers through the glass and the blood rushing in my ears. "Director of Operations," I repeated slowly. "My job, we're not firing you. Harold said quickly, holding up his hands. God, no, we need your memory. You're the historian. We're moving you to a new role. Senior Compliance Archivist. Handle the paperwork, the documentation. Help Brian get up to speed, organize the files, make sure the audits are pretty. Compliance Archivist. He was putting me out to pasture. He was taking the keys to the engine room and handing me a coloring book. You want me to file papers, I said, the rage starting to simmer in my gut like a pot of chili left on the stove too long. It's a vital role, Brian piped up. Data governance is huge right now. Plus, need you to document all your little tribal knowledge. You know, get it out of your head and into the cloud so we can scale. Tribal knowledge. That's corporate speak for everything you learned through suffering that I want to steal so I can fire you later. I looked at Harold. 15 years. I had missed my niece's baptism because a transformer blew. I had spent Christmas Eve in the subfloor chasing a water leak. I had saved his ass more times than he had hairs on his head. Now I was being shoved into a corner so his son could play CEO. I felt something crack inside me. It wasn't a loud crack. It was quiet, like a bolt shearing off deep inside a machine. Okay, I said. Harold blinked. Okay, I repeated. I forced a smile. It felt like I was baring my teeth at a predator. If that's the direction you want to go, I'll handle the paperwork. Fantastic. Harold slapped the table. I knew you'd be a team player. Brian, you're in charge. Becky will show you the ropes. Brian checked his watch. Great. I have a lunch meeting, but maybe you can email me a summary of what you do all day. Keep it brief. Bullet points. I looked at the storm raging outside the window. I looked at the compliance wall where my name, Linda Miller, responsible operator, was the only thing standing between these idiots and a federal lawsuit. Sure, Brian, I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. I'll get right on the paperwork. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to do exactly what they asked. I was going to do the paperwork, every single page. And when I was done, they were going to wish I had just burned the building down instead. The meeting didn't end with a bang. It ended with a whimper of HR handouts. A nervous woman from Human Resources, department that consisted of one lady named Patty, who mostly planned the Christmas potluck and tracked PTO, slid a packet across the table to me. It was thick, printed on cheap paper that was still warm from the copier. The title page read, Job Description, Senior Compliance Archivist/Support Specialist. Support Specialist. That was the dagger. It's the corporate equivalent of telling a brain surgeon they're now in charge of washing the scalpels. Really think this is a better use of your bandwidth, Brian said, standing up and buttoning his fleece vest. He did it with this jerky, aggressive motion, like he was armoring up for battle against productivity. I want to focus on high-level strategy. You can handle the weeds. The weeds are what keep the power on, Brian, I said, unable to help myself. He laughed, waving a hand dismissively. That's legacy thinking. Automation, Linda. We're going to automate the workflows. Saw a TED talk about self-healing grids. Why are we paying guys to watch gauges when an API can do it? Mike, my lead tech, looked at me with panic in his eyes. He knew. He knew that our grid was held together by spit, duct tape, and custom patches I wrote in 2012 that no API on Earth could interpret. If Brian tried to automate the cooling tower sequence, he'd likely cause a pressure explosion that would miss the parking lot with glycol. Just read the packet, Becky, Harold said, checking his phone. We've got a lunch reservation at the steakhouse. Brian's treating. Corporate card, of course, he winked. Oh, and by the way, those new growth contracts, the ones with the regional logistics hub, they absolutely loved the tour you gave their auditors last month. They kept mentioning how safe they felt knowing you were personally overseeing the transition. I froze. My hand hovered over the HR packet. They signed, I asked. Signed, sealed, delivered. Harold beamed. Biggest contract since the hospital. That's why we need Brian at the helm, to manage this new scale. But hey, your name is all over the safety addendums, so they're happy. It's a win-win, my name, again. So, I said slowly, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. You sold them on my safety record, my operational protocols, and my personal oversight. And now you're removing me from operations. Brian rolled his eyes. You're still here, aren't you? You're the archivist. If we have a question, we'll ask. Don't be so dramatic, it's just a title change. The clients don't care who pushes the buttons as long as the lights stay green. Actually, I started, clients care very much about. Let's not get bogged down in semantics. Harold interrupted, standing up. We're celebrating. Come on, Brian, Patty. Get Becky set up in the new office. New office turned out to be a converted storage closet near the loading dock. It had no window, just a vent that rattled and smelled like diesel exhaust from the delivery trucks. My desk was a folding table. My chair was one of those old fabric ones with a stain that looked suspiciously like taco sauce. I sat there for a long time, listening to the muffled sound of the data center through the wall. I could hear the hum of the transformers. I could feel the vibration in the floor. It was like being locked out of your own house while watching a stranger set up a meth lab in your living room. I opened the HR packet. It was insulting. A pay cut, commensurate with reduced responsibilities, and a list of duties that included organizing historical files, digitizing paper logs, and assisting the director with ad hoc scheduling. Ad hoc scheduling. I was going to be his secretary. I felt a hot tear track down my cheek, angrily wiped it away with the back of my hand, leaving a smudge of grease on my face. I don't cry. I fix things, but I couldn't fix this. You can't fix stupid when it owns 51% of the stock. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike. Mike, he's asking for the passwords to the root admin accounts. Says he wants to audit the user privileges. Becky, he doesn't even know Linux. What do? I stared at the screen. My instinct was to run back there, push Brian into a server rack, and lock the console, to save them from themselves. But then I looked at the archivist job description again. Duty #4, maintain accurate records of all operational protocols and personnel certifications. Harold had said the clients loved the safety stuff. He said they used my name. I took a deep breath. The air in the closet was stale, but my mind was suddenly clearing. The rage was cooling into something harder, something sharper, was turning into obsidian. I typed back to Mike, give them to him. Give him everything he asks for. Document that he asked. Document that you gave them. Mike, are you serious? He'll brick the system. Not today, he won't. Just do it. And Mike, don't fix anything unless he explicitly tells you to in writing. I put the phone down. I looked at the stack of cardboard boxes in the corner of the room. They were labeled OLD records do not shred. Harold had dumped them here years ago, telling me to deal with this junk eventually. I stood up and walked over to the first box. I ripped the tape off. Dust motes danced in the fluorescent light. Inside were binders. Thick, dusty binders with labels like FEMA Grant 2010, State Critical Infrastructure Filing 2015, and Hazardous Material Handling Protocols. I pulled out the FEMA binder. This was from the rebuild after the hurricane. It received a massive federal grant to harden the facility against disasters. Millions of dollars to upgrade the grid connection and install the military-grade generators. I flipped it open. There, on page 4, was the key personnel clause. Grant eligibility is contingent upon the continuous employment and oversight of a state-licensed master infrastructure operator, level 4 or higher, designated as the primary point of responsibility. Any change in key personnel must be reported to the Oversight Committee within 72 hours, potentially triggering a compliance review and funding clawback. I ran my finger over the signature at the bottom, Linda Miller. I opened the next binder, the insurance policy for the hospital servers. Clause 14B, continuity of expertise. Insured facility guarantees that all critical life safety systems are under the direct supervision of a certified operator with a minimum of 10 years' experience in medical data continuity. Signature, Linda Miller. I sat back on my taco sauce chair. The humiliation in my chest began to recede, replaced by the cold, calculating hum of a technician diagnosing a fatal system error. They hadn't just demoted me, had inadvertently violated the foundational legal structure of their entire business. Harold thought my name on the wall was just decoration, like a hang in their kitty poster. He didn't realize it was the load-bearing beam. He wanted me to do paperwork. Oh, I was going to do the paperwork. I was going to read every single line of fine print in this damp, windowless closet. I was going to map the spiderweb of liability they had trapped themselves in. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pack of Marlboros. I tapped one out just to hold it, to smell the unlit tobacco. Welcome to the archives, boys, I whispered to the empty room. I turned on the ancient computer they had left on the desk. It groaned to life, the fans sounding like a dying jet engine. I cracked my knuckles. Step 1, inventory. I needed to know exactly how much they owed to the name Linda Miller. As I started typing, I heard a loud thump from the other side of the wall, followed by the muffled sound of a collision. Then, Brian's voice, yelling, "Who put a ladder there? Jesus, someone move this junk, I smiled. He had tripped over the ladder to the halon gas suppression system. If he had hit the release valve, it would have dumped $50,000 worth of gas into the room and sucked the oxygen out of the air. He missed it by inches. This time, I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it The Exit Strategy. And then I started to work. Not for them, for me. That night, I didn't go straight home. I drove my beat-up car to a spot overlooking the reservoir. It's where the high-tension power lines cross the water, huge steel skeletons marching across the lake, carrying enough voltage to fry a dinosaur. I sat on the tailgate, smoking a cigarette, watching the red warning lights blink on top of the towers. Blink, blink, blink. Consistent, reliable. Unlike my career. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank. Mortgage payment scheduled. $1,450. I groaned. That was the reality check. I couldn't just storm out, flip a table, and tell Brian to shove his Patagonia vest where the fiber optics don't shine. I had a mortgage on a small ranch house that still smelled like my dad's pipe tobacco. Had a mom in an assisted living facility 2 towns over that cost more per month than Brian probably spent on hair gel. Memory care, they called it. She didn't remember me half the time, but she remembered to ask if I was still working at that loud place with the nice Harold. If I quit, the health insurance vanished. If the health insurance vanished, Mom's meds went from expensive to bankruptcy. Harold knew this. That was the sickest part. Knew I was the breadwinner for a ghost family. He knew I was trapped by responsibility. That's why he felt safe handing my job to a kid who thought redundancy was a bad word. He thought I was a captive audience. I flicked my cigarette butt into a soda can in the truck bed. Not captive, I muttered, dormant. When I finally got home, I didn't turn on the TV. I cleared off the kitchen table. I had brought the compliance archivist work home with me. Technically, I wasn't supposed to take files off-site, but since I was now the archivist, who was going to stop me? Brian, he was probably busy trying to figure out how to expense a peloton to the company account. I laid out the photocopies I'd made. It was a mosaic of liability. I started with the state of Texas filings. Every year, we have to file a critical infrastructure resiliency plan. It details how we handle heat waves, hurricanes, and cyber attacks. I found the 2023 filing. Section 4.1, Operational Leadership. Designated Operator, Linda Miller. Qualifications, Master Electrician, Certified Data Center Professional, CDCP, FEMA Incident Command Level 3. I looked at the notes in the margin. Harold had written, make sure Becky's certs are attached, the inspector loves her. Then I moved to the client contracts. The hospital network one was the thickest. I flipped to the termination for cause section. Usually, this is boring legal boilerplate, but because we host patient data, the standards are incredibly high. Article 9, Breach of Confidence. The client reserves the right to immediate contract termination without penalty if the vendor fails to maintain qualified oversight as defined in Schedule A. I flipped to Schedule A, Qualified Oversight, defined as 24/7 availability of a named site reliability engineer with minimum 10 years experience in HIPAA-compliant environments. The only person in the building with 10 years experience was me. Mike had 4. Brian had 0. If I left, the hospital contract wasn't just voidable, it was a breach. They could sue for damages. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, cheap stuff, burns the throat in a good way. Kept reading. It got worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it. The EPA permits for the diesel generators, my name. The Homeland Security clearance for the refinery data, my background check. The massive tax break the county gave us for creating high-skilled jobs, contingent on retaining certified technical leadership. I sat back, the realization washing over me like ice water. Harold hadn't just built a business. He had built a house of cards. He had used my diploma as the glue. He honestly thought that because he owned the building, he owned the credibility. He didn't understand that in this industry, trust isn't transferred like a deed. It's attached to the person who knows which red button stops the meltdown. I looked at the clock. 2:00 a.m. My eyes were burning. I had a choice. Option A, I stay. I let Brian dismantle my work. I let him cut corners. I sign the papers he puts in front of me. I keep my health insurance, I keep my house, and I slowly die inside while watching the inevitable disaster unfold. When it crashes, they'll blame me anyway because I'm the archivist. Option B, I leave, I walk away. The contracts breach. The grants get clawed back. The hospital panics. The refinery pulls the plug. The company implodes. But if I did option B, I'd be nuking my own reputation too. Linda Miller, one who walked out and left the County 911 system vulnerable. I needed a third option. I needed an option C. I needed to make sure that when the house of cards fell, I was the one standing outside holding the wind machine, not the one trapped in the rubble. I took a sip of whiskey. A plan was starting to form. It was risky. It required me to play a game I hated, office politics. But I wasn't just a tech or a cable monkey anymore. I was the archivist, and I was going to archive the hell out of their incompetence. I grabbed a fresh notepad. I wrote the paper trail. Step 1, document the transition of power. Make it undeniable that Brian is in charge. Step 2, let Brian be Brian. Do not interfere with his mistakes. Merely record them. Step 3, notify the stakeholders, not as a whistleblower, but as a dutiful compliance officer. I wasn't going to sabotage the servers. I didn't need to. Entropy would take care of that. I just needed to make sure the world knew exactly who was holding the wheel when the bus went off the cliff. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the hum of my own refrigerator, thinking about the servers 10 miles away. They were running on my settings, my schedules, my logic. Tomorrow, Brian would start changing them. Good luck, kid, I whispered to the ceiling fan. Gonna need more than a Patagonia vest. The next morning, I arrived at work to find the break room replaced. The vending machine that dispensed lukewarm Mountain Dew and stale honey buns was gone. In its place was a gleaming chrome espresso machine that looked like it belonged on the International Space Station, and a basket of organic fruit that was already attracting fruit flies. It's about wellness, Brian announced. He was standing in the middle of the control room, holding a tiny cup of espresso that looked ridiculous in his hand. He had swapped the vest for a slim-fit dress shirt that was unbuttoned one button too far. We need to fuel our bodies if we want to fuel the data economy. Mike was standing by the console, looking like he wanted to murder someone with a crimping tool. He caught my eye and subtly tilted his head toward the main monitoring screen. I looked up. The temperature set points for the server halls had been changed. For 15 years, we ran the halls at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's conservative, sure. Google runs hotter. But our equipment is a mix of new blades and old iron that gets cranky if it sweats. The screen now read, target, 78 degrees F. I walked over, my boots heavy on the floor. Brian, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Why are the halls set to 78? He smiled, a condescending tilt of the lips. Efficiencies, Linda. Read a white paper from Facebook. They run their centers warmer to save on cooling costs. We're wasting thousands a month chilling this place like a meat locker. I'm optimizing the OpEx. I took a deep breath. Facebook designs their own custom servers to handle heat. We are running legacy Dell racks from 2016 and the 911 dispatch mainframe, which is essentially a toaster oven with a hard drive. If you run them at 78 in a Texas July, inlet temperature will spike to 90 in the hot aisles. It's fine, he dismissed me, turning back to the espresso machine. The sensors will alert us if it gets critical. We need to be lean. Lean, I repeated. Okay, just so I can update the compliance log, you are overriding the manufacturer's recommended operating range to save on electricity. I'm modernizing our sustainability profile, he corrected. Write that down. Got it, I said, pulled out my notepad and wrote. 09:15 a.m. Director Brian increases temp to 78 F against advise of technical staff. Cited Facebook white paper as justification for ignoring Dell thermal specs. Later that afternoon, the real test came. I was in my closet office, scanning the original deed to the property. Fun fact. Harold put the land in a separate LLC to dodge taxes, which might be interesting later, when the floor vibrated. It was a deep, rhythmic thrumming. The kind you feel in your teeth. I knew that feeling. It was the number 3 generator doing its weekly exercise cycle. Every Wednesday at 2:00 p.m., the system automatically fires up the massive diesel engines to make sure they work. It runs for 30 minutes, then shuts down. Suddenly, the vibration stopped, abruptly, like a heart attack. I waited for the restart. Nothing. I grabbed my radio, force of habit. Remembered I was an archivist. I put it down. I sat on my hands. Do not fix it. Do not fix it. 2 minutes later, my door flew open. It was Mike. He was pale. He shut it off, Mike gasped. Who? Brian. He walked out to the generator yard and hit the emergency manual stop on number 3 while it was spooling up. Why? I stood up, forgetting my vow of silence. He said it was noise pollution during his conference call with the investors. He said we don't need to run them every week, that once a month is enough to save diesel. My blood ran cold. Mike, if you don't run those engines weekly, the seals dry out, the fuel separates, and if you emergency stop a diesel engine under load without a cool-down cycle, you can warp the cylinder heads. I know, Mike yelled. I told him that. He told me to stop being a mechanic and start being a visionary. I closed my eyes. Warped cylinder head meant a $40,000 repair and 3 weeks of downtime. If we lost mains power during those 3 weeks, we'd be down to N+1 redundancy. If another generator failed, the hospital would go dark. Did you log it? I asked Mike. What did you log it? I know, I came straight here. Go back to the console, I ordered, my voice turning into the steel whip I used to run this place with. Open the incident ticket. I'd exactly this. Director manually executed e-stop on generator 3 during active load test to reduce noise levels. Potential damage to cylinder heads unassessed. Routine maintenance schedule canceled by director order. Do it now. Mike stared at me. Becky, he's going to break it all. I know, I said, sitting back down and picking up my scanning wand. That's why we need the receipts. Go. Mike ran out. I sat there, shaking. This wasn't funny anymore. Wasn't just the office-style incompetence. This was negligence. I looked at the phone on my desk. I picked up the receiver and dialed a number I knew by heart. It wasn't Harold. It wasn't Brian. It was Gary, the facilities manager at the regional hospital network. We had shared beers at industry conferences for a decade. He trusted me. Lone Star Data, this is the archives, I said when he answered. Becky? Gary's voice was warm. Archives. What the hell are you doing there? I thought you were running the show. Changes, Gary. Exciting changes, I said, keeping my voice bright and fake. Listen, I'm just updating our contact logs for the new director, Brian. I wanted to confirm your current emergency escalation protocols. Sure, same as always. Call me, then the CIO. Great, I said. And just a heads up, since I'm in a non-operational role now, all those automated alerts about generator health and thermal variances, they're going to Brian now. I won't be verifying them before they get to you. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Wait, Gary said, you're not verifying the alerts? Nope, I'm strictly paperwork now. Brian is streamlining the process. He's very focused on efficiencies, like reducing generator test cycles. Another silence. He's reducing the test cycles. Gary's voice lost its warmth. It became very sharp. Just to save diesel, it's very green. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure you knew to look out for emails from Brian's CEO at Lone Starcom. Have a great day, Gary. I hung up before he could ask more. I stared at the phone. I had just lit the fuse. Gary wasn't going to let that slide. The hospital didn't care about green, they cared about keeping ventilators running. I looked at my spreadsheet. Step 3, notify stakeholders. Check. Now, I just had to wait for the heat to rise. Literally, by Friday, the data center smelled like hot plastic and impending doom. The temperature in the cold aisles was creeping up to 74 degrees. The servers were spinning their fans at maximum RPM, screaming like a jet taking off inside a library. Brian was walking around with noise-canceling headphones, oblivious to the mechanical agony surrounding him. I was in my digitizing a stack of invoices from 2018 when Harold waltzed in. He looked flushed, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Hot in here, huh? He chuckled, wiping his brow with a silk handkerchief. It's 78 degrees, Harold. Physics doesn't negotiate, I said, not looking up from the scanner. Right. Brian's tuning the PID loops. It'll settle out. He sat on the edge of my folding table, making it groan. So, Becky, we have a little hiccup. A hiccup. Insurance renewals. And the state certification for the fire suppression system. Apparently, the paperwork needs a certified master operator signature. Bureaucracy, right? He slid a stack of papers across the table. They were flagged with little yellow sticky notes that said sign here. I looked at the top document. It was an attestation to the state fire marshal that the Halon system had been inspected and was fully operational. System Brian almost tripped over with a ladder. I asked. He didn't trip. He interacted with it. Look, we need this filed by 5:00 p.m. or the county pulls our occupancy permit. Brian's certification is pending. You know how slow the state board is. Brian's certification wasn't pending. Brian couldn't distinguish a fire suppression nozzle from a bidet. So you want me to sign, I said, picking up the pen. As the responsible operator. Exactly. Just for this quarter. Until Brian gets his paperwork sorted. You're still an employee. Technically, you still have the license. Help us out for old time's sake. We're a family. I looked at the paper. If I signed this and there was a fire and the system failed because Brian had fired the maintenance vendor, which I suspected he had, I would be the one going to jail for negligence. Not Harold, not Brian, me. They weren't just using my past work. Were trying to mortgage my future freedom to cover their present incompetence. I looked at Harold. He had a piece of spinach stuck in his teeth. He looked at me like I was a trusted appliance. A toaster that would always make toast, even if you threw it in the bathtub. I need to review these, I said, putting the pen down. Review? It's standard boilerplate. You wrote half of it. Harold's smile tightened. Come on, Becky. Don't be difficult. The investors are coming Monday. Need a clean dashboard. I'll have it on your desk by 4 o'clock, I lied. Harold hesitated, then patted my shoulder. Good girl. I knew we could count on you. We're all gonna be rich, Becky. Just ride the wave. He left. I stared at the papers. I felt a cold rage that was cleaner and sharper than anything I'd felt before. It was the clarity of a sniper adjusting for windage. I grabbed my phone, needed to know exactly what Brian had done to the fire system maintenance contract. I logged into the accounting server, which they hadn't revoked my access to because they forgot I set it up. I searched for safety first fire protection. Status, canceled. Note from director, vendor too expensive. Switching to Jim's Fire and Lawn bundled service. Jim's Fire and Lawn. He had hired a landscaper to maintain $1 million inert gas suppression system. I started laughing, a dry, hacking laugh that sounded like a generator trying to start with no fuel. If I signed that paper, I was committing fraud. But if I didn't sign it, I looked at the life after Todd's funeral comment in the prompt. I needed that level of twisted energy. I didn't sign it. Instead, I took a red Sharpie. On the signature line, I drew a small, precise picture of a middle finger. Then I shredded the document, but I wasn't done. Needed to make sure they couldn't forge it. I opened the digital file on the server, the PDF template they used. I opened it in a hex editor. I corrupted the header data just enough so that it would look fine as a thumbnail, but would crash any printer that tried to print it. Then I sent an email to the state fire marshal's office. A friendly inquiry from my personal email. Subject: clarification on operator status Lone Star data. Whom it may concern. I am writing to formally update my employment status. As of Tuesday, I have been reassigned to a clerical role and no longer have operational oversight or authority at the Lone Star facility. Please advise on the necessary forms to remove my license from the site's active compliance roster immediately. I hit send. That email was a tactical nuke. The fire marshal doesn't play around. Once they knew the site had no licensed operator, the clock would start ticking. 72 hours to fix it or they shut the building down. I walked out to my truck. I needed supplies. I wasn't going to just leave. I was going to give them a parting gift. I drove to the hardware store. I bought a tube of industrial-strength epoxy and a bag of glitter, fine, craft-grade glitter. The kind that you never, ever get out. I drove back. The parking lot was empty except for Brian's Tesla. It was probably inside optimizing the janitorial schedule. I walked into the server room. The heat hit me. It was definitely 78 degrees. I walked to the main admin console, the physical keyboard and mouse that controlled the master system. I squeezed a tiny bead of epoxy into the USB ports, just enough to gum them up. Then I sprinkled a pinch of glitter into the gaps between the keys. Petty? Yes. Effective? No. Satisfying? God, yes. The real sabotage wasn't the glitter. It was the silence. I wasn't going to tell them about the email to the fire marshal. I was going to let them find out when the inspector showed up with a padlock. I went back to my closet. I put the signed stack of papers, which were actually just blank pages I'd stuffed in the envelope, on my desk. Ride the wave, I muttered, mimicking Harold. I opened a can of sriracha peas, my stress snack, and crunched down on one. Burn was good. It reminded me I was still alive. Monday was going to be a bloodbath, and I had a front row seat. The weekend passed like a kidney stone, painful and slow. I spent it drinking cheap beer on my porch, watching the bugs zap themselves into oblivion on the bug zapper. Zap, another one gone. Zap, just like my career. On Sunday night, I got a text from Gary, the hospital facilities guy. Gary, we need to talk. Off the record. Waffle House on I-35. 6 a.m., Waffle House. The neutral ground of the working class. Nothing good happens at a Waffle House at 2 a.m., but at 6 a.m., that's where wars are planned over scattered, smothered, and covered hash browns. I walked in. The place smelled like bacon grease and despair. Gary was in a back booth, looking grim. Sitting next to him was a woman I didn't know, sharp suit, eyes like lasers, drinking black coffee. Becky, Gary nodded. This is Alina. She represents the infrastructure investment fund that owns the land next to the refinery. I sat down. Infrastructure fund? Sounds fancy. Do you guys pay for overtime, or do you just offer exposure? Alina didn't smile. We pay for competence, Miss Miller. Gary tells me you're the reason the hospital data didn't corrupt during the 2021 freeze. I kept the generators running with a hairdryer and a prayer, I said, flagging down a waitress. Coffee. Omen 4 drip if you have it. We're building a new Tier 4 facility, Alina said, cutting to the chase. 5 miles from Lone Star. We break ground in 2 months. But we have a problem. We don't have an ops lead who knows the local grid quirks. And Gary added, dipping a piece of toast into his yolk, I told Alina that if Lone Star goes down, which, based on your phone call, I assume is imminent, hospital is going to trigger the emergency pourability clause in our contract. We'll need a new host. Immediately, I looked at them. This wasn't a job interview, it was a mutiny. Harold thinks he owns the clients, I said, pouring sugar into my coffee until it was basically syrup. He thinks because they signed a piece of paper, they're stuck. Contracts have performance clauses, Alina said. If the responsible operator withdraws, the risk profile changes. Gary's legal team is already drafting the breach notice. But we need to know, are you really out? I looked at the grease stains on the table. I thought about Brian and his fleece vest. I thought about the landscaper maintaining the fire system. I thought about Harold calling me family while picking my pocket. I'm not just out, I said. I'm gone. I sent the withdrawal notice to the fire marshal on Friday. Gary choked on his toast. You called the fire marshal, clarified my employment status. I smiled innocently. I'm just a compliance archivist, Gary. I can't be responsible for life safety systems. That would be dishonest. Alina actually smiled then. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. So on Monday, when the inspector shows up, Harold will be holding an empty bag, I finished. We can offer you a signing bonus, Alina said, sliding a napkin across the table. She had written a number on it. I looked at the number. It was more than I made in 3 years at Lone Star. Plus full autonomy, she added. No sons, no golf buddies. You run the floor, we write the checks. I picked up the napkin. I want to bring my lead tech Mike and Sarah from billing. She knows where the bodies are buried. Done, Alina said. One more thing, I said, tearing the napkin into shreds and dropping them into the ashtray. I don't want to start in 2 months. I want to start Tuesday. Why Tuesday? Gary asked. 'Cause Monday is the investor meeting at Lone Star. I grinned. And I want to be able to walk out of that conference room and drive straight to my new office while the smoke is still clearing. Gary laughed. You're mean, Becky. I'm not mean, I said, standing up. I'm optimized. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The air tasted sweeter. Even the exhaust from the refinery smelled like victory. But I still had to get through Monday. Monday morning, day of the big investor presentation. The parking lot was full of rental cars, suits everywhere. Harold was running around like a headless chicken, adjusting his tie every 5 seconds. Brian was wearing a full suit, looking sweaty and manic. Becky, Harold grabbed my arm as I walked in. Did you sign the fire forms? On your desk, I said. Technically true. The blank envelope was on his desk. Great, great. Listen, stick around the conference room. If they ask any technical questions Brian gets stuck on, just jump in. Smoothly, you know? Smoothly, I agreed, like a laxative. What? Like a well-oiled machine, Harold, right? Good, go get set up. I walked into the conference room. It was packed. The investors, a group of venture capital guys from Austin who looked like they'd never touched a tool in their lives, were sitting on one side. Harold and Brian were on the other. I sat in the back, in the support chair. Brian stood up. He loaded his PowerPoint. The first slide said, Lone Star Data, Disrupting the Legacy. Gentlemen, Brian started, his voice cracking slightly. Welcome to the future. He clicked to the next slide. It was a graph showing projected savings. By optimizing our cooling to industry-leading standards, we have reduced energy spend by 15% in just 1 week, Brian bragged. One of the investors raised his hand. Quick question. Operational logs show an inlet temperature of 79 degrees this morning. Dell's warranty voids at 80. Isn't that cutting it close? Brian froze. He looked at me. I smiled. I didn't say a word. I just opened a bottle of water very loudly. Crackle, crackle. Brian stammered. That's a sensor error. Legacy sensors. We're replacing them. And the generator maintenance, another investor asked. We saw a reduction in fuel costs. Does that mean you're running fewer tests? We're running smarter tests, Brian said, sweating now. The door opened. Everyone turned. It wasn't the catering. It was a man in a blue windbreaker with a badge on his chest. State Fire Marshal. Behind him was Gary. And behind Gary was a process server holding a stack of legal papers. Harold Jenkins, the fire marshal, barked. Harold stood up, pale as a sheet. Yes, we're in a meeting. I'm shutting you down, the marshal said, stepping into the room. We received notice that your responsible operator has withdrawn. You are operating a critical infrastructure facility without a licensed supervisor. You have 0 minutes to comply. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Harold looked at the marshal, then he looked at Brian. Then, slowly, terrifyingly, he looked at me. Becky, he whispered. I stood up. I smoothed out my Carhartt pants. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, it's Miss Miller, and I believe my exit interview is overdue. The silence in the conference room was so heavy you could have bagged it and sold it as weighted blankets. The fire marshal, a guy named Rick who looked like he ate concrete for breakfast, stood with his arms crossed. The investors were looking at their phones, probably texting their lawyers to pull out the funding. Harold, bless his heart, tried to play it off. Rick, buddy. Harold walked around the table, arms open. There's been a misunderstanding. A clerical error. Becky, Miss Miller is right here. She's our senior. She's here. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Becky, tell him. Tell him you're still the responsible operator. It's just a title change, right? You're still supervising the floor. This was it. The moment. I looked at Brian. He was slumped in his chair, the disruptor deflated. I looked at the investors. Actually, Harold, I said, stepping forward, I'm not. What? Harold's smile flickered like a dying light bulb. I'm the compliance archivist, I said, enunciating every syllable. My job description, which Brian wrote and you signed, explicitly states my duties are administrative. I have no operational authority. I cannot authorize maintenance. I cannot oversee safety protocols, and therefore I cannot be the licensed operator of record. But you're here, Harold hissed. Say you're doing it. We can fix the paperwork later. That would be fraud, Harold, I said sweetly. And I don't look good in orange. The fire marshal stepped forward. Mr. Jenkins, if Miss Miller is not in charge of the life safety systems, who is? Do you have another level 4 operator on site? Harold looked at Brian. Brian, you took the course, right? The online one. Brian turned a shade of green usually reserved for spoiled guacamole. I watched the videos, but I didn't take the exam yet. The website was down. The website was down, the marshal repeated flatly. You're running a Tier 3 data center hosting 911 dispatch, and your qualification is the website was down. Gary, standing in the doorway, cleared his throat. This constitutes a material breach of the hospital service agreement. Paragraph 4, Section C. Immediate termination for cause. He slapped a folder onto the table, pulling the data. We're moving to the new facility down the road, effective immediately. You can't do that. Brian squeaked. We have a contract. You had a contract, Gary corrected. Now you have a liability. Harold was hyperventilating. He turned on me, the family mask finally slipping off completely. You did this, he snarled. You planned this. You ungrateful, after everything I did for you. I gave you a job. You gave me a paycheck, Harold, I said, my voice dropping to that low, dangerous register I use when a live wire is sparking. I gave you a legacy. I built this place while you were working on your handicap. I fixed your mistakes. I covered your son's ass. And when you decided I was obsolete, you tried to turn me into a filing cabinet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the HR packet they had given me. You wanted me to do the paperwork? I asked. I did it. I tossed the packet onto the table, slid across the mahogany and hit Brian's elbow. I archived every email where Brian denied maintenance requests. I documented every temperature spike. I logged the generator shutdown. It's all there. The history of the fall of Rome, categorized by date and time. The investors were standing up now, collecting their briefcases. One of them looked at Harold. Mr. Jenkins, expect a call from our legal department. We don't invest in fraud. They walked out. Fire Marshal looked at his watch. You have 1 hour to safely power down the non-essential loads before we cut the main breaker. If you don't have a licensed operator, you don't have power. That's the law, 1 hour. Brian panicked. We can't migrate the data in 1 hour. No, I said, you can't. I looked at Mike, who was standing by the door, trying not to grin. Mike, I said, you want a job? Where? Mike asked. With me and Alina. Starting salary is 20% over what you make here, and we don't use Sriracha as a management tool. I'm in, Mike said, ripping off his Lone Star ID badge and tossing it on the floor. Sarah, I asked the billing girl. Take me with you, she whispered. I turned back to Harold. He was sitting in his chair, head in his hands. The empire was crumbling, and he was just a man in a golf shirt watching it burn. I'm done here, I said. The words tasted like champagne. Turned to leave, but Brian stood up. You can't just steal our staff, he shouted. That's poaching. It's the free market, Brian, I said over my shoulder. I thought you loved disruption. I walked out of the conference room, past the glass walls, into the server hallway. The heat was oppressive now. The fans were screaming. The red warning lights on the generator panels were blinking. It was a symphony of failure. And for the first time in 15 years, I didn't have to conduct it. Walk from the conference room to my truck was only 50 yards, but it felt like walking across the moon. Behind me, the chaos was erupting. I could hear Brian yelling at the fire marshal, a strategy that has literally never worked in the history of fire safety. I could hear Harold on the phone, screaming at someone, presumably a lawyer, who was about to charge him $500 an hour to tell him he was screwed. I stopped at my locker. Metal door had a sticker on it from 2008, Y2K Survivor Team. I opened it. Inside was my spare pair of boots, a bottle of ibuprofen, and a framed photo of my dad in his Vietnam jacket. The jacket Karen, my ex-sister-in-law, long story, had tried to donate to Goodwill. I rescued it. I packed my things into a cardboard box. It wasn't much. 15 years of blood and sweat. It all fit in a box that used to hold printer paper. Mike was waiting for me by the exit. He had his own box. Did you see Brian's face? Mike asked, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. He looked like he tried to divide by zero. He did, I said. He tried to divide competence by ego. Suddenly, the heavy blast doors to the server hall hissed open. Harold came running out. He wasn't the arrogant owner anymore. He was a desperate old man. Becky. He grabbed my door handle as I was about to climb in. Please, you can't leave us like this. The hospital people could die. I looked at him. The people could die card, the ultimate guilt trip. The hospital is migrating to the backup site as we speak, I said calmly. Gary has been mirroring the data to Alina's cloud for 3 days. I set up the transfer script on Sunday night. Harold froze. You helped them leave. I protected the data, Harold, I said. That's what a responsible operator does. I made sure the client was safe. Even if it meant cutting you out. I'll double your salary, he begged, triple it. Just tell Rick you're back in charge. We can fix the cooling. I'll fire Brian, I swear I'll fire him right now. I looked at the building, the beige metal siding. The satellite dishes on the roof. It was my baby. I raised it. I fed it diesel and cool air. But it had rabies now. It's too late, Harold, I said. Broke the trust? You can't patch that. I pulled my door shut. Harold stood there, hand on the glass, looking like a ghost. I started the engine. The Ford rumbled to life, a sound I trusted more than any human in that building. Where to, boss? Mike asked, leaning into my window. The Waffle House, I said. I think Alina is buying lunch. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the lights in the lobby flicker. Then, the exterior floodlights cut out. The fire marshal had pulled the main breaker. Lone Star data was dead. I didn't feel sad. I reached into my center console and pulled out the little plastic Danny DeVito figurine I kept for good luck. Don't ask. It's a vibe. I set him on the dashboard. So anyway, I started narrating to the imaginary Reddit audience in my head. That's how I became the CEO of a rival data center, before I even officially quit the old one. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the neighborhood app. Alert, power fluctuations reported in the industrial park. AC repair crews dispatched. I laughed. But the story wasn't quite over. There was one loose end. My mom. Harold paid for her care facility's corporate discount plan. It was a perk of the job. If I quit, the rate doubled. I pulled into the Waffle House parking lot. Alina's black SUV was there. I walked in. Alina was on her laptop. Hospital migration is 90% complete, she said without looking up. 0 packet loss. You're good, Miller. I have a condition, I said, sitting down. Another one, my mom, she's in the Shady Oaks Memory Care Center. Harold was covering the premium. Alina stopped typing. She looked at me. We own Shady Oaks, she said. I blinked. You own the nursing home? Our fund invests in critical infrastructure, Alina shrugged. Healthcare, data, energy, we own the building. I'll flag her account as executive family. She won't pay a dime. I felt the last knot of tension in my chest loosen. It unspooled like a wire coming off a reel. I started to cry, just a little. Ugly, silent tears that smelled like relief and hash browns. Okay, I choked out. Okay. Pull yourself together, director, Alina said, sliding a coffee toward me. We have a groundbreaking ceremony on Tuesday, and I need you to approve the generator specs. Hear you like them loud. I like them reliable. I wiped my eyes. Good, because Brian is currently trying to restart Lone Star's backup generators, and she checked her phone. Yup, he just blew the head gasket on number 3. I took a sip of coffee. Told him, I whispered. It's been 3 months since the Great Texas Data Massacre. Lone Star Data is currently a Spirit Halloween store. I'm not joking. They liquidated the servers for scrap metal. Now you can buy a sexy nurse costume where the 911 mainframe used to sit. Harold declared bankruptcy and moved to Florida to start a crypto consulting firm, which I assume is just him yelling at clouds about blockchain. Brian, last I heard, he's trying to become a lifestyle influencer on TikTok. His handle is at The Disruptor, and he posts videos of himself taking ice baths and talking about mindset. Gets about 12 views per video. One of them is me, watching from a burner account just to feel something. As for me, I'm sitting in the control room of TexCore 1, the new facility. It's beautiful. The floors are white anti-static tiles. The servers are brand new blades that hum in perfect harmony. The temperature is a crisp 68 degrees. Mike is the floor manager. He's allowed to wear shorts, but he has to cover the prison tattoos when clients visit. Air trade, we absorbed 95% of Lone Star's clients. The transition was seamless because, well, I had the passwords. But here's the twisted part. The part you clicked for. Remember that life after Todd's funeral Pinterest board mentioned in the prompt? Well, I found something better. When we bought the scrap assets from Lone Star's liquidation auction, for pennies on the dollar, I got my old hard drive back. And on it, I found the automated backups from Brian's laptop that he had accidentally synced to the main server because he didn't understand directory paths. It wasn't just business plans. It was his search history. How to fake a FEMA certification. Can you run a diesel generator on vegetable oil? Is it illegal to delete safety logs? Danny DeVito back tattoo cost. Wait, that last one was real? I thought the prompt was joking. No, the kid really wanted a Danny DeVito tattoo. Why? I don't know. Maybe he thought it was ironic. I didn't leak the logs. That would be petty. Instead, I printed the vegetable oil search query, framed it, and mailed it to the State Board of Professional Engineers with an anonymous note, just in case he ever tries to get a license again. I also sent a gift basket to his mom, Harold's ex-wife, Linda. Contained a bottle of that expensive MLM essential oil she loves. Thieves, ironic, and a printout of Harold's hidden Cayman Island account numbers that I found in the old records box. I hear the divorce settlement reopening is going to be spicy. So here I am, 45 years old, simple tech turned director of operations. I spend my evenings listening to ASMR videos of server fans spinning up. It soothes me. It sounds like money. It sounds like competence. The other day, a new intern asked me what my secret to success was. I looked at him, took a drag of my cigarette, and said, "Kid, never let them turn you into paperwork. And always, always know where the manual kill switch is." He nodded, terrified. I went back to my screens, all green, all stable. I own the lights now. And nobody, not a single soul, is ever going to turn them off without asking me first. We're all healed. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.